The latter group included Reverend Thaddeus Winters of the Third Congregational Church, who noted that the Caldwells never attended Sunday services, yet maintained a curious shrine-like room in their east wing, filled with ancient texts in languages no local scholar could identify. During this period, 3 children from Salem reported seeing Eliza Caldwell's face in reflective surfaces: a shop window, a frozen pond, a polished silver tray. Each claimed the girl appeared to be speaking, her eyes wide with terror, though no sound could be heard. After each sighting, the reflective surface in question would crack or shatter within hours. Meanwhile, the Caldwells' eldest son, Theodore, began to exhibit troubling behavior. Once a promising student at the Salem Academy, the 16-year-old now refused to leave the mansion. His former classmates reported that in his final days at school, Theodore had carried a small hand mirror everywhere, whispering to it between lessons. His teacher, Miss Adelaide Porter, recalled confronting him about this habit only to have the boy reply, "They're hungry for more. They have always been hungry." By February, the Caldwell family had withdrawn completely from public life. Deliverymen left goods at the edge of their property, unwilling to approach the house itself. At night, neighbors reported seeing all the mansion's windows illuminated by a faint bluish light that pulsed with slow regularity, like the beating of an enormous heart. On the outskirts of Salem, in a modest cottage overgrown with wild roses, lived Margaret Harlow, the town's archivist and self-appointed historian. A widow of 43 years, Margaret's once auburn hair had faded to a rusty gray, pulled back in a severe bun that emphasized her sharp cheekbones and penetrating hazel eyes. Her thin lips rarely smiled, and her narrow shoulders bore the weight of Salem's darkest secrets with rigid dignity. Margaret had been documenting the Caldwell affair with methodical precision, filling leather-bound journals with newspaper clippings, witness testimonies, and her own observations. Her fixation had begun as professional curiosity, but had evolved into something far more personal. "They brought something back with them," she whispered to herself one evening in late February, as she pored over shipping manifests by lamplight. Her fingers, stained with ink and paper cuts, traced the inventory list from the Morrigan's lament. Not cargo, passengers. A knock at her door startled her from her ruminations. Standing on her threshold was Abigail Winters, the Reverend's 17-year-old daughter, a willowy girl with alabaster skin and eyes the color of storm clouds. Her typically immaculate appearance was disheveled. Her dove-gray dress was askew, and her blonde hair tumbled loose from its pins. "Miss Harlow," she gasped, her voice tremulous with urgency. "Father sent me. Theodore Caldwell has been seen in town." Margaret ushered the girl inside, pressing a cup of tea into her trembling hands. "Where?" Margaret demanded. "What was his condition?" "Near the cemetery. Mrs. Belmont saw him digging at the earth with bare hands," Abigail replied. She said his skin appeared translucent, like clouded glass. Margaret's blood ran cold. "Did he speak to anyone?" "Only nonsense, madam," he repeated. The threshold thins until Constable Parker approached him. Then he fled toward the marshlands. Abigail hesitated. "Father believes the boy is possessed. He's organizing a prayer vigil." "Prayer will not suffice," Margaret murmured, retrieving an ancient text bound in weathered leather from a locked cabinet. "This situation demands understanding, not blind faith." The book, a treatise on metaphysical boundaries acquired from a Dutch scholar decades earlier, fell open to a chapter entitled "Reflective Portals and the Entities Beyond." "Miss Harlow, what do you know of these mirrors?" Abigail asked, her composure returning. Margaret fixed her with a penetrating gaze. "I know that Ezekiel Caldwell's final voyage took him not to China as reported, but to a remote island in the South Pacific. I know that the indigenous population had been decimated months before his arrival, and I know that mirrors have long been considered thresholds between worlds." She turned to a crude illustration showing humanoid shapes emerging from a mirror's surface. "The Caldwells did not purchase those mirrors. They harvested them. Each glass is a door, and something is using poor Eliza as a key to open them all." That night, as sleet lashed against Margaret's windows, a note arrived from Sheriff Holcomb. Constance Caldwell had been found wandering the beach at midnight, her nightgown drenched despite the freezing temperatures. Clutched in her arms was not a child, but a mirror fragment wrapped in swaddling clothes. When separated from the shard, she became violent, screaming about the others coming through. Most disturbing of all, her eyes had changed. Where once there were irises and pupils, Now there were only reflective surfaces, like quicksilver beneath glass. The Salem Town Council convened an emergency session on the 1st of March, drawing 23 prominent citizens to the municipal building's oak-paneled chamber. Frost coated the windows from the outside while condensation dripped down the interior glass like silent tears. Margaret Harlow attended at Sheriff Holcomb's insistence, bringing her research materials in a worn leather satchel that seemed to weigh more heavily with each step toward the dais. "The Caldwell situation has progressed beyond a mere domestic peculiarity," announced Mayor Franklin Whitaker, his jowls quivering beneath his silver beard. "We have a mother in custody who appears to be transforming. We have a missing child. We have a son whose physical form defies natural law." Reverend Winters rose, Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. "This is a matter for ecclesiastical authority. The sin of idolatry has manifested in physical corruption." With respect, Reverend," Margaret interjected, spreading her documents across the table, "what afflicts the Caldwells transcends theological categorization. During my examination of Constance this morning, I observed her reflection moving independently of her body. A collective inhalation filled the room." Margaret continued, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "When I placed a mirror before her, her reflection smiled while her actual face remained impassive. Moreover, where her reflection should have shown quicksilver eyes, I saw normal human ones, brown, tearful, and terrified, as if the real Constance Caldwell is trapped within the glass while something else wears her skin." Dr. Everett Sullivan, the town physician, cleared his throat. "I've examined Theodore Caldwell. The boy's flesh has taken on properties inconsistent with human tissue. It has the refractive quality of crystal while maintaining elasticity. When cut," he paused, swallowing visibly, "the wound seals immediately and exudes not blood but a silvery substance that hardens on contact with air." As the council deliberated, a commotion erupted outside. The chamber doors burst open, admitting a snow-dusted Constable Parker. His right hand was wrapped in a bloodied handkerchief, and his typically florid complexion had blanched to the color of curdled milk. "The Thornfield mansion," he gasped. "It's changing." Within the hour, a delegation including Margaret, the sheriff, Dr. Sullivan, and 3 armed deputies approached the Caldwell estate through swirling snow. What they beheld defied rational explanation. The Victorian architecture remained, but the substance of the building had altered fundamentally. Walls that once were wood and stone now shimmered with an opalescent quality, surfaces rippling like disturbed water whenever the wind gusted. Windows had multiplied across the facade, dozens more than had existed before, each one revealing not the interior of the house but different landscapes entirely. A crimson desert under twin suns, a city of impossibly tall spires, a forest of trees with translucent trunks. Most horrifying of all, these alien vistas were not empty. Figures moved within each window portal, pressing appendages that approximated hands against the glass. Their form suggested humanity, while simultaneously negating it. Proportions slightly wrong, movements too fluid, features reflective where eyes and mouths should be. "The house itself has become a mirror," Margaret whispered, her scholarly detachment finally cracking. "And whatever exists on the other side is no longer content to merely watch." As they stood transfixed, Ezekiel Caldwell appeared at the front entrance. His body seemed to flicker between solidity and transparency, and his voice resonated with multiple timbres speaking in unison. "You misunderstand," he said, smiling with teeth that reflected the observer's own horrified expressions. "We did not collect the mirrors. They collected us." The Salem Historical Society archives later yielded Margaret Harlow's personal journal, its pages water-damaged but legible. The entry dated March 3, 1878, provides the only first-hand account of what transpired when the delegation entered the Thornfield mansion. March 3, 1878. "I write these words with a hand that trembles not from fear but from the certainty that what I have witnessed today has forever altered my understanding of our universe." Sheriff Holcomb insisted we maintain formation as we crossed the threshold of the Caldwell residence, a threshold that no longer separated mere interior from exterior, but rather our world from something other. Inside, the house denied all architectural reason. Corridors stretched and contracted with our breathing. Staircases led both up and down simultaneously. Most disquieting was the light. It emanated not from lamps or windows, but from the surfaces themselves, pulsing in hues that human eyes were never meant to perceive. They have been watching us for centuries, Ezekiel explained as he guided us through this impossible geometry. His movements left trailing echoes of himself, like a stone skipped across the surface of time. Every mirror ever crafted is their attempt to widen the aperture between dimensions. We discovered what remained of the family in what once was the grand parlor. The two elder Caldwell children floated suspended in midair, their bodies partially translucent. Through their torsos I could see internal organs that glistened like polished crystal. They turned to regard us with eyes that reflected our own faces back at us, but with expressions we were not wearing. Most disturbing was the tableau centered in the room. Eliza, or what had been Eliza, sat cross-legged before an arrangement of mirror fragments formed in a perfect circle. Her small fingers traced patterns upon their surfaces while her lips moved in a language that caused Sullivan's ears to bleed when she spoke it aloud. "She is negotiating terms." Constance Caldwell's voice emerged from behind us. The woman we had left restrained in the town jail now stood in the doorway, though her movements suggested puppetry rather than voluntary motion. The mirrors have always hungered for corporeal form. We have provided the first vessel family. The journal entry abruptly terminates here, with a long ink streak suggesting the writer was interrupted. When the narrative resumes 3 days later, Margaret's handwriting has changed subtly, more angular, more precise. March 6, 1878. The transition proceeds as expected. 23 mirrors remain unbroken. 23 vessels required. The town council will suffice. Those with academic curiosity ask what we are. The simplest explanation is that we are the things that watch from behind reflections. We have always been there, patient beyond human comprehension. Young Eliza remembers being human. She misses the sensation of breathing. I have assured her that memory fades. Soon she will remember only the silvered realm, as I have forgotten all but fragments of the life I once lived. Tomorrow we break the remaining barriers. The aperture will widen permanently. Salem will become the first crossing point, the first of many. Salem town records show that on March 7, 1878, every reflective surface in the county, from shop windows to still ponds, shattered simultaneously. The Thornfield mansion vanished, leaving behind a perfect circular depression in the earth. The excavation of the Thornfield Depression began in late April of 1878, after weeks of bureaucratic hesitation and clerical debate. The circular void where the mansion once stood measured precisely 73 feet in diameter, with edges so geometrically perfect they appeared machine-cut rather than formed by natural collapse. The soil at the perimeter had crystallized into a substance resembling black glass that chimed softly when struck, producing tones that lingered unnaturally in the air. Professor Artemis Clayton of Miskatonic University supervised the operation, having convinced the remaining town officials that scientific inquiry might reveal the fate of the missing council members. A slight man with a perpetual stoop and fingers stained permanently yellow from chemical experiments, Clayton approached the anomaly with the methodical caution of one accustomed to examining the inexplicable. "Note that vegetation refuses to encroach upon the circumference," he observed to his assistant, an eager young scholar named Hammond. "Even moss, which thrives in the surrounding area, will not cross the crystalline barrier." The laborers, brought in from neighboring Arkham, as no Salem residents would approach the site, worked with reluctant efficiency, their shovels scraping against earth that seemed to resist intrusion. At 3 feet down, they discovered the first mirror fragment, a jagged piece of silvered glass that, despite being buried in damp soil, bore no tarnish or deterioration. When Clayton attempted to place the fragment in a specimen box, 3 workers reported seeing a momentary reflection in its surface, not of the present scene, but of themselves in poses of abject terror, mouths stretched in silent screams. The workers abandoned their posts within the hour. By sunset, 7 additional fragments had been unearthed, each displaying similar properties of unnatural preservation. Most disturbing was the discovery that, when placed in proximity to one another, the pieces appeared to slide incrementally closer together of their own accord, as if drawn by subtle magnetism. Whatever force animated the Caldwell collection persists in these remnants, Clayton noted in his field journal. "I theorize that the entire mansion and its occupants have not vanished, but rather have been translated into a state of matter beyond conventional perception." On the 3rd day of excavation, the workers breached a subterranean chamber where the mansion's foundation should have been. Instead of architectural remnants, they found a perfectly spherical cavity lined with a reflective substance reminiscent of liquid mercury but solid to the touch. The chamber measured 30 feet in diameter and appeared to have no entrance or exit point besides the hole created by the excavation team. Most remarkable was the acoustic property of the space. Any sound made within it echoed back, not as a diminishing repetition, but as entirely different sounds altogether. A cough returned as childish laughter. A whispered question came back as the sound of breaking glass. A dropped tool produced the distinct noise of distant waves crashing on a shore. Clayton, against the protestations of his colleagues, spent a full night alone in the chamber documenting these phenomena. His notes from those hours, later recovered, grow increasingly disjointed, culminating in a final entry written in a hand barely recognizable as his own. They persist behind the thinnest of veils. I see now what Margaret understood toward the end. They do not wish to invade our world, but to incorporate it. The mirrors are not portals, but looms, weaving realities together strand by silvered strand. They showed me Salem as it will be, as it is becoming, as it has always been in their dimension. The transformation is not complete, merely paused. The university archives reveal that Professor Clayton survived his night in the mirrored chamber, though colleagues noted profound changes in his demeanor afterward. He abandoned his academic position without formal resignation and purchased the land surrounding the Thornfield Depression, using his family's considerable fortune. Construction began immediately on a circular stone structure that enclosed the excavation site entirely. Local newspapers, initially eager to report on the bizarre happenings, grew strangely silent on the matter by summer's end. The Salem Evening Chronicle, once vociferous in its coverage of the Caldwell calamity, published only a small notice on August 23, 1878. Thornfield site declared private property. By order of Mayor Covington, citizens are advised that the former Caldwell estate is now restricted from public access. Trespassers will be prosecuted with the utmost severity. Questions regarding this ordinance are to be directed to the new Department of Public Safety and Reflection Management. What the notice failed to mention was that Mayor Covington had never existed in Salem's municipal records prior to July of that year, nor did any town charter establish a Department of Reflection Management. Church attendance across Salem plummeted precipitously throughout autumn. Reverend Winters, once Salem's moral authority, now delivered sermons to near-empty pews. His final recorded homily, delivered on November 1st, consisted solely of the repeated phrase, "The glass thins between worlds. Prepare for divine reflection." The winter of 1878 brought peculiar phenomena to Salem. Snowfall accumulated everywhere except in perfect circular patterns throughout the town. Residents reported that on still nights, these snow-free circles revealed not soil or pavement beneath, but reflective surfaces that showed not the starry sky above, but unknown constellations and formations no astronomer had catalogued. A census conducted in January 1879 by Massachusetts state officials noted with confusion that Salem's population had increased by exactly 23 persons since the previous count, despite no recorded births or arrivals to account for this change. More troublingly, interviews with these new residents yielded identical responses to questions about their origins. "I have always been here. You simply failed to notice my reflection." The academic community largely dismissed the Thornfield incident as mass hysteria or elaborate hoax, with one notable exception. Dr. Sophia Blackwood, professor of comparative mythology at Cambridge University, published a monograph in 1881 titled Reflective Entities in Cross-Cultural Mythologies, The Salem Correspondence. Her research connected the Caldwell incident to ancient Egyptian beliefs about mirrors as gateways for the Ka, Mesoamerican obsidian mirrors used for divination, and Japanese legends of Kagami no Yurei, mirror ghosts who replace their living counterparts. Most compelling was her discovery of a previously untranslated passage from the journal of 16th-century Portuguese explorer Gonçalo Fernandes, who documented encountering an isolated Pacific island tribe that worshipped entities they called the Watching Ones. These savages cover all reflecting surfaces and will not gaze upon still water, believing their souls may be seized through their reflections. They speak of ancient bargains made with beings that dwell in a world reversed from our own, who hunger eternally for physical form. Most disturbing is their prophecy that when the moon grows full upon the winter solstice, the barriers between worlds grow thin, and the watching ones may reach through any reflective surface to claim what they covet. A curious addendum to Dr. Blackwood's research emerged decades later. when architectural historian Eleanor Prescott conducted the first thorough documentation of Salem's structural evolution from 1879 to 1900. Her survey revealed a disturbing pattern invisible to casual observation. Every building constructed after the Caldwell incident incorporated precise geometric anomalies that, when mapped from above, formed fragments of an enormous reflective sigil across the town's layout. The builders themselves appeared unaware of these deviations, Prescott noted in her unpublished findings. When interviewed, they insisted they had followed conventional designs, despite evidence of consistent 23-degree angles where right angles should exist, and circular motifs embedded within seemingly rectangular structures. Most telling was her discovery that Clayton's circular enclosure around the Thornfield Depression formed the exact center of this town-wide pattern. The structure itself, ostensibly built as a private research facility, had no official blueprints filed with any municipal office. Its stone walls, 17 feet high and 3 feet thick, bore no windows or decorative elements save for a single entrance, a door of polished obsidian that reflected distorted versions of those who approached it. In the spring of 1882, a delegation from the Massachusetts Historical Society attempted to interview Clayton about his ongoing work at the site. The three scholars who entered the obsidian door emerged 2 hours later with identical serene expressions in a written statement, purportedly from Clayton declining further academic scrutiny. All three subsequently resigned their positions and purchased adjacent properties near the Thornfield enclosure. Meteorological records from this period document an atmospheric peculiarity specific to Salem. The quality of light that fell upon the town took on an almost liquid characteristic, as if filtered through glass that subtly bent reality. Photographers found their images of Salem developed with inexplicable distortions. Shadows appeared to fall in directions contradicting the sun's position, and human figures often showed slight duplications, like visual echoes. Most disquieting were reports from mariners approaching Salem by sea. Captain Jeremiah Holt of the merchant vessel Prudence described the phenomenon in his log dated July 14, 1883. As we approached Salem Harbor at dusk, the town appeared to shimmer as if viewed through clear water. Most extraordinary was the perfect reflection of the settlement upon the sea's surface despite considerable wave activity. This mirrored image showed Salem not as it stands today, but seemingly as a city of crystalline towers and impossible structures. More disturbing still, when I trained my spyglass upon individual buildings, I observed activities in the reflection entirely different from those occurring in the actual town above. The captain added a final observation that he later attempted to strike from the record. The inhabitants moved differently in the reflection, more fluid, more purposeful. And though I cannot explain how I perceived this detail from such distance, I would swear upon my immortal soul that every citizen's eyes in that reflected Salem shone like polished silver. The Salem town records from September 1883 contain a curious notation in the meeting minutes, nearly lost amidst mundane discussions of road repairs and tax assessments. Written in a different hand than the clerk's usual script, a single paragraph appears in the margins. Motion approved unanimously to replace all municipal mirrors with those provided by the Thornfield Research Society. The council acknowledges the generous donation and the superior reflective quality of these surfaces. No prior mention exists of any such society, nor does any record indicate who presented this motion or why it warranted unanimous support from a council that rarely agreed on matters as simple as lamplighting schedules. By the winter of 1884, Salem's gradual metamorphosis accelerated in subtle ways that visitors noticed more readily than residents. The Salem Evening Chronicle began printing peculiar advertisements for Caldwell's Genuine Reflecting Glass. See yourself as you truly are, though no such business appeared in commercial registries. These advertisements grew increasingly esoteric, eventually including phrases in languages that linguistic experts at Harvard later identified as amalgamations of ancient Sumerian and previously undocumented South Pacific dialects. Throughout 1885, birth records in Salem showed a statistical anomaly that drew brief attention from medical journals. Every child born that year possessed eyes of such unusual light sensitivity that they required tinted spectacles even in dim illumination. Physician reports noted that when examined in darkness, these infants' pupils appeared to reflect light rather than absorb it, similar to those of nocturnal creatures, yet with a distinctive silvered quality, unlike any known mammalian adaptation. The Diaries of Josephine Marsh, schoolteacher at Salem Primary School from 1875 to 1890, provide intimate observations of this generation's development. April 12, 1889. The children born after the Thornfield incident continue to exhibit peculiarities beyond their unusual eyes. Their artistic expressions uniformly depict landscapes and beings that exist in no earthly location. When questioned about these drawings, each child provides identical responses. It's home behind the glass. Their mathematical aptitude defies conventional educational theory. They conceptualize geometric principles that confound even Professor Whitaker from the university. Most disturbing is their collective behavior during reflective exercises. When reading aloud, they often speak in perfect unison without visual cues and occasionally insert phrases in that strange tongue that has become increasingly common in Salem. Yesterday, little Mary Winters placed her hand against the classroom window at precisely 3 o'clock, and every child in the room mirrored her movement simultaneously, pressing their palms to any reflective surface within reach. I have documented 17 instances where their reflections continue movements after the children have become still. The school board dismisses my concerns as feminine hysteria, but I know what I observe. These are not the same children who begin the school day. Something else peers through their eyes by afternoon, something ancient and patient that merely wears their faces. Josephine Marsh disappeared in December of 1889. Her final diary entry consists of a single sentence. They have shown me what waits on the other side of every reflection, and I can no longer pretend not to see it watching me. The archives of the Essex Institute contain a weathered leather portfolio discovered during the demolition of a cellar wall in 1932. The fragile documents within, letters, clippings, and field notes, bear the letterhead of the New England Society for Psychical Research, an organization disbanded in 1893 under circumstances never fully explained. Of particular significance is a confidential report authored by Dr. Philomena Waite, a physician and paranormal investigator who arrived in Salem in January 1890 to examine what she termed mass perceptual aberrations reported throughout the township. Her methodical analysis provides the most clinical assessment of Salem's condition during this critical period. Confidential report, Salem Anomalies, January 18th, February 27, 1890. Dr. P. Waite, Nesper lead investigator. My preliminary survey confirms the presence of profound environmental abnormalities centered around Salem Township. The reported phenomena cannot be dismissed as mass hysteria or superstitious fancy. Objective measurements reveal consistent deviations from natural law that increase in intensity, proportionate to proximity to the Thornfield enclosure. Spectroscopic analysis of ambient light within town limits shows wavelength distortions present nowhere else in recorded scientific literature. Light appears to bend around certain structures, creating overlapping reality states visible under specialized prismatic lenses. When photographed through these lenses, human subjects frequently display complex superimpositions. Their forms appear doubled, with the secondary image exhibiting subtle anatomical differences, elongated digits, altered facial proportions, etc. Most troubling are my findings regarding the reflected surfaces throughout Salem. Using calibrated instruments, I have determined that light requires measurably longer to return from reflective surfaces than physical laws should permit. The delay ranges from 3 microseconds in ordinary mirrors to nearly 7 seconds in specimens sourced from the Thornfield facility. This suggests these reflections travel significantly farther than the simple distance between subject and mirror, as if the light journeys elsewhere before returning with its captured image. The Thornfield materials have proliferated beyond any reasonable explanation. Chemical analysis reveals these substances contain elements not present on the periodic table. When scratched or broken, these surfaces appear to heal themselves over periods ranging from hours to days. During my 5th week of investigation, I observed silver-eyed children gathering at precise intervals throughout town. They would stand motionless before reflective surfaces for exactly 23 minutes, their lips moving in synchronized patterns. Audio recording devices fail in their presence, producing only a continuous tone at precisely 1,877 Hertz. Most significant is my documentation of what locals have termed slippage events, moments where reality appears to briefly overlay with another state of existence. During these episodes, structures momentarily transform into crystalline counterparts, and Salem residents exhibit synchronous behaviors with their reflections, though the reflections perform these actions microseconds before the physical subjects. I have become convinced that Salem exists simultaneously in two states, our conventional reality and what I term a reflection realm that grows increasingly dominant. The boundary between these states has thinned precipitously since my arrival. I am terminating my investigation effective immediately. My colleague Dr. Harrison has agreed to submit this report on my behalf, as I can no longer trust that what I place in the post will reach its intended destination unaltered. I have observed my own reflection making independent decisions. Yesterday, it refused to maintain the pretense of mimicry at all. The report ends abruptly. A newspaper clipping affixed to its final page announces Dr. Waite's admission to Danvers State Hospital for nervous exhaustion and persistent delusions in March 1890. Hospital records indicate she died 3 days later of self-inflicted lacerations after breaking a mirror in her quarters. The peculiar transformation of Salem continued its inexorable progression through the closing decade of the 19th century. While official records grow conspicuously sparse after Dr. Waite's investigation, a collection of personal correspondence between Matilda Crane, Salem's telegraph operator, and her sister in Boston provides rare insight into the town's accelerating metamorphosis. March 19, 1891. Dearest Eleanor, I fear this may be my final letter. The postal service has become unreliable. Messages sent rarely match what was written, as if the words themselves transformed during transit. The telegraph office where I have worked these 15 years has been renovated with peculiar materials that cause my skin to tingle unpleasantly when touched. The new mirrors installed last week seem to drink the light rather than reflect it. Yesterday, I witnessed something I cannot rationalize. Professor Clayton, or the man who still uses that name, visited my office to send messages to academic colleagues across the country. As he dictated his correspondence, I observed that his shadow did not match his movements. While he gestured with his right hand, his shadow raised its left. When I fixed my gaze upon this discrepancy, he smiled with too many teeth and said, "You see more clearly than most, Miss Crane. How wonderful that your sister in Boston might soon see clearly too. I have never mentioned you to this man. The children born after 1877 have matured in frightening ways. They congregate nightly around the Thornfield enclosure, their voices harmonizing in that horrible language that hurts my ears. Most troubling, they have begun to construct small reflective objects, intricate crystalline geometries that they place throughout town at precise intervals. When sunlight strikes these objects, momentary windows seem to appear in empty air, showing glimpses of impossible architecture. Salem's oldest families are vanishing, Eleanor, replaced by perfect simulacra bearing their names and memories, yet fundamentally altered. They move differently, too fluid, too precise, and their conversations contain subtle cadences that hypnotize the unwary. I have taken to stuffing cotton in my ears during public gatherings. The mirror in my bedroom no longer shows my face, but that of a woman with my features arranged in subtly wrong proportions. Last night, as I prepared for bed, my reflection placed its finger against the glass and pushed. The surface dimpled inward like water. I fled the house immediately and have not returned. I am sending this from neighboring Beverly, though I fear they have spread beyond Salem's boundaries. If you receive this letter unchanged, do not respond. Do not visit. In truth, I believe Salem as we knew it no longer exists, except as a thinning membrane between worlds. With enduring love, Matilda. This letter, preserved between the pages of Eleanor Crane's Bible, bears a curious postscript in different handwriting, elegant flowing script that seems to shimmer subtly when viewed from certain angles. P.S. Disregard these paranoid ramblings. Matilda has been under significant strain. All is well in Salem. You really must visit soon. The reflections here are most revealing, and we have reserved a place specifically for you. 23 mirrors await your gaze. Town census records confirm that Eleanor Crane relocated to Salem in April 1891. No further correspondence between the sisters exists. The final days of 1891 brought unremitting fog to the Massachusetts coast, a spectral shroud that clung to Salem with unnatural persistence. Meteorological records from neighboring towns document clear skies and autumn sunshine merely miles away, while Salem remained entombed in luminous mist that seemed to bend and refract light in ways that defied natural explanation. Into this atmospheric anomaly arrived Inspector Thaddeus Olmsted of the newly formed Federal Bureau of Unexplained Phenomena. His weathered face bore the permanent creases of a man who had witnessed inexplicable horrors, yet clung steadfastly to rational explanation. The silver streaks in his otherwise coal-black hair had multiplied since his investigation of the New Orleans veiled incident 3 years prior, yet his steel-gray eyes retained their penetrating acuity. Olmsted established temporary headquarters in a modest boarding house at the very edge of Salem, owned by elderly widow Frances Whitcomb, whose rheumy eyes never quite focused on her distinguished guest, and whose conversation betrayed no awareness of Salem's transformation. Each morning he documented his observations in a leather-bound journal, using a personalized cipher that rendered his notes indecipherable to casual observation. The density of abnormal phenomena increases exponentially as one approaches the central township, he wrote on December 17th. Architectural elements shift when not directly observed. Buildings appear to inhale and exhale at 23-minute intervals. Most troubling is the quality of human movement. Salem residents exhibit a fluidity suggesting reduced bone density or altered anatomical structure. Olmsted's investigation brought him increasingly closer to the Thornfield enclosure, though he approached with methodical caution, establishing observation points at calculated distances. Through his custom-crafted brass telescope, he observed what appeared to be ceremonial activities within the circular wall, figures moving in cosmic patterns around a central structure that seemed to phase between solid architecture and liquid geometry. On the winter solstice, Olmsted witnessed the culmination of whatever process had been transforming Salem for 14 years. His final journal entry, recovered months later by his federal colleagues, provides the only account of that night's events. December 21st. Full lunar eclipse coincides with solstice. The fog has developed striations that appear to form enormous reflective corridors across the township. The residents have emerged from their dwellings en masse, arranged in concentric patterns throughout Salem. Their movements suggest ritualized choreography, though no music is audible. The Thornfield structure has begun to emit light from within. Not the yellow warmth of flame, or the harsh blue-white of electric illumination, but a silvery radiance that seems to invert shadows rather than cast them. Objects touched by this light momentarily reveal their reflections before the physical form itself. Most extraordinary is the transformation of the citizenry. As this light washes over them, individuals briefly reveal their true nature, their bodies momentarily becoming translucent, showing internal structures that appear crystalline rather than organic. Their synchronized movements create a town-wide geometric pattern identical to the sigil I documented in the architectural layout. The barrier is dissolving. I can perceive both sides simultaneously now, our world and the inverted realm beyond every reflective surface. They have accomplished what the Caldwells began. Salem has become the first successful merger point, the template for what they intend for every human settlement. I am retreating while retreat remains possible. What exists in Salem now is no longer merely our world reflected, but something new, a hybrid reality where the laws of both dimensions apply simultaneously. God help anyone who enters Salem after tonight, for they will never truly leave. They will merely become another reflection, endlessly repeated through time, and the Federal Archives of Unusual Phenomena housed in Washington remained conspicuously silent about Salem for 17 years following Inspector Olmsted's disappearance. A curious bureaucratic amnesia seemed to envelope all official channels whenever inquiries about the Massachusetts coastal town were raised. Train schedules omitted Salem stops. Nautical charts showed inexplicable distortions in coastal mapping precisely where Salem Harbor should have appeared. In the bitter January of 1908, Eleanora Blackwell, grandniece of Professor Artemus Clayton and last surviving member of his bloodline, received a peculiar package at her Chicago residence. The brown paper wrapping bore no postmark or sender information, merely her name inscribed in iridescent ink that seemed to shift between indigo and silver depending on how light struck the characters. Inside lay a journal bound in material that resembled leather but felt oddly cool to the touch, as if perpetually storing the chill of deep shadows. A note affixed to its cover read simply, "The reflection seeks its source. Complete the observation." The elegant copperplate handwriting matched precisely that of her great-uncle, despite his documented disappearance 3 decades prior. Eleanora, a spinster professor of comparative mythology at Northwestern University, had built her academic reputation specifically by avoiding her family's obsession with Salem and its anomalies. Yet the journal's arrival coincided with troubling dreams that had plagued her since winter solstice. Visions of corridors lined with mirrors where her reflection walked several steps ahead of her, turning to beckon with a knowing smile that Eleonora's actual face had never worn. Preposterous, she whispered to the empty study, yet her fingers trembled as they traced the journal's strange binding. 30 years gone, and now this phantom correspondence. Outside her frost-etched windows, Chicago's gaslights cast wavering illumination through an unseasonable fog that had persisted for 23 days. The mist possessed an unusual quality. It seemed to capture light and hold it suspended in gossamer tendrils rather than merely diffusing it. Objects viewed through this atmospheric anomaly appeared doubled, their secondary images slightly offset and inverted. When Eleonora finally summoned the courage to open the journal, she discovered not her uncle's expected field notes, but blank pages that, when tilted toward her reading lamp, momentarily revealed text that faded as quickly as it appeared. Only by capturing the reflection of these pages in her vanity mirror could she discern the full message, a message written in reverse script. The process proceeds beyond Salem now. The merger expands outward at 23 miles per annum. Atmospheric conditions precede the transition. When fog persists beyond natural meteorological patterns, the veil between worlds has already grown tenuous. They have mastered the sequence begun at Thornfield and refined their methodology. Each reflection now serves as a conduit. Each mirrored surface weakens the dimensional barrier fractionally. The human eye itself, with its reflective properties, has become their most elegant instrument of transition. The final page contained not text, but a meticulously rendered map of the United States overlaid with concentric circles emanating from Salem. Chicago lay precisely on the outermost ring. As Eleonora stared at this disturbing cartography, the silver-backed hand mirror on her vanity toppled forward without apparent cause. In the moment before it shattered against the hardwood floor, she glimpsed not her own terrified countenance in its reflection, but the serene, silver-eyed face of a man wearing Professor Clayton's features arranged in subtly wrong proportions. The morning fog draped itself across Chicago like a silvered shroud, pressing against Eleonora Blackwell's windows with unnatural persistence. For 3 weeks now she had observed its peculiar qualities, how it seemed to breathe in rhythmic undulations, how it transformed ordinary street lamps into spectral sentinels that cast illumination yet somehow deepened shadows simultaneously. What disturbed her most was how the mist affected reflective surfaces throughout her home. The modest collection of mirrors and silver serving pieces inherited from her maternal grandmother, once merely decorative appointments, now commanded her attention with disquieting authority. Each morning, she discovered them subtly repositioned, angled precisely to create a complex network of reflective sightlines converging upon her writing desk. "Coincidence in an old woman's nerves," she muttered, though the academic rigor that had defined her professional life recognized the mathematical impossibility of such arrangements occurring by chance. Eleonora had begun covering these surfaces with heavy cloths, yet each dawn revealed the coverings neatly folded beside their charges, the reflective items restored to their apparent stations in this silent geometric conspiracy. The faculty at Northwestern had noted changes in her appearance and demeanor. Her once sharp lectures on mythological parallels across disparate cultures now meandered into unsettling discussions about reflective entities and dimensional permeability. Most concerning to her colleagues was her appearance. At 63, Eleonora had begun wearing tinted spectacles at all times, claiming sensitivity to light. Those who glimpsed her eyes behind the darkened lenses reported an unsettling silvery quality to her irises that defied medical explanation. "Professor Blackwell seems to be suffering from the Clayton affliction at last," whispered her department chair to the university president. Perhaps a leave of absence might be prudent. But Eleonora had anticipated such intervention. 3 days after receiving the mysterious journal, she had submitted her resignation and liquidated her modest estate. Her preparations complete, she purchased a train ticket not to Salem, where no trains officially traveled, but to Danvers, Massachusetts, the nearest recognized station to the place that called to her through every reflective surface. The Danvers station master, a gaunt man whose skin possessed an unsettling translucence in certain angles of light, regarded her ticket with knowing recognition. "Salem-bound then, Professor?" he inquired, though she had specified neither her destination nor occupation. "I seek to complete my family's work," she replied, the words emerging unbidden from her lips. The station master nodded, his smile revealing teeth that reflected rather than absorbed the late afternoon light. "The 23rd carriage will accommodate you most appropriately. It has windows specially treated for scholarly observation." The carriage, when she boarded, contained exactly 23 passengers whose features she could never quite focus upon directly. They acknowledged her with synchronized nods as she took the single vacant seat, positioned precisely in the center of the car, beside a window that, unlike its companions, appeared to display not the passing Massachusetts countryside, but rather a landscape of crystalline spires under an impossible sky, where light seemed to pour upward from the ground rather than descend from above. As the train departed, Eleonora opened the strange journal once more. Its formerly blank pages now contained flowing script that gleamed with metallic luster, visible without need of reflection. The text described with meticulous precision the journey she was currently experiencing, down to her exact thoughts in the exact moment she read them. The final sentence on the page sent ice through her veins. And thus, Eleonora Blackwell, last daughter of the Clayton bloodline, returns to Salem not as observer, but as completion, the final reflective surface required. The train's approach to Salem defied conventional physics. Windows that had shown crystalline landscapes now revealed only their own reflections, creating an infinite regression of train cars stretching into impossible distance. Eleonora observed how the other passengers had grown motionless, their features becoming increasingly indistinct with each passing mile, as if reality itself struggled to maintain their coherence. When the conductor announced their arrival, his voice resonated with multiple timbres simultaneously, creating discordant harmonies that made Eleonora's fillings ache. "Salem Terminus," he intoned. "End of the conventional line, beginning of the convergence." The station that greeted Eleonora bore little resemblance to any New England railway platform. Its architecture suggested Victorian sensibilities filtered through a fractured prism, proportions subtly wrong, angles that seemed to bend when observed peripherally. Most striking was the quality of light that suffused the structure, neither sunlight nor artificial illumination, but rather an ambient radiance that seemed to emanate from the surfaces themselves. "Welcome home, Professor Blackwell," spoke a voice behind her, familiar yet impossible. She turned to face her great-uncle Artemus Clayton, appearing exactly as he had in family photographs from 1878. His immaculately trimmed beard showed not a single gray hair. His frock coat remained free of wrinkles or wear. Only his eyes betrayed his transformation. Where human irises should exist, polished silver discs reflected Eleonora's own startled expression back at her. "You've been waiting for me," she whispered, her academic skepticism crumbling before undeniable evidence. "For 43 years, 3 months, and 23 days, Clayton confirmed, each word emerging with crystalline precision. "The final convergence requires completion by one who bridges both worlds, one who carries the bloodline that initiated the merger but remained untouched by the process until now." He extended a hand that seemed solid yet somehow provisional, as if its materiality represented merely one possibility among many. "Salem awaits your documentation. The journal must be completed by the one whose skepticism remained intact." Beyond the station awaited a Salem transformed beyond recognition. Buildings that should have been weathered, clapboard, and brick now gleamed with opalescent surfaces that rippled subtly when not directly observed. Streets followed geometric patterns impossible in Euclidean space, intersecting at angles that caused Eleonora's vision to swim when she attempted to trace their configurations. Most disquieting were the inhabitants. They moved with liquid grace, their limbs bending at impossible points, as they conducted what appeared to be ordinary activities through extraordinary means. Children played in circular formations, their laughter creating visible patterns in the air that crystallized momentarily before dissolving into mist. "What has Salem become?" Eleonora managed, her scholar's vocabulary inadequate before this spectacle. "Not become," Clayton corrected, his voice resonating with that same multitonal quality the conductor had exhibited. "Revealed. Every mirror ever crafted was a window into this reality. Every reflection a glimpse of what always existed alongside your world. The Caldwells merely widened the aperture. I refined the method. You," his silver eyes fixed upon her with unnerving intensity, "will document the final merging." Eleonora stood at the precise center of what had once been the Thornfield mansion, now transformed into a vast geodesic dome composed entirely of reflective surfaces. Each triangular panel captured not her image but glimpses of other realities. Worlds where physical laws operated in reverse, where light possessed mass and gravity expressed itself as color. "The journal requires your final entry," Clayton said, his voice now barely distinguishable from the resonant hum that permeated the structure. "Complete the observation that began in 1877. Record what human eyes have witnessed across the convergence." The journal in her hands had grown warm, its peculiar binding now translucent enough to reveal an intricate network of crystalline veins pulsating beneath the surface. When she opened it, the pages emitted a subtle luminescence that cast no shadow, but instead seemed to clarify the air around it, rendering reality in sharper focus. "I am merely the observer," Eleonora whispered, her academic detachment wavering as the enormity of what Salem had become threatened to overwhelm her rational faculties. Clayton's laugh shimmered in the air like mercury droplets. "Dear niece, you misunderstand your function. The journal does not require your documentation. It requires your perception. The human mind is the final reflective surface, the most perfect mirror ever crafted." He gestured